Stardust and the king of metals. Listen closely. Can you hear it? That sharp, distinct pshk, followed by the hiss of escaping carbonation. It is the soundtrack of American leisure, the sound of a Friday night tailgate in Texas, a 4th of July barbecue in Ohio, or a weary construction worker's lunch break in the high steel of Manhattan. It is the birth cry of a single aluminum can. But to understand the sheer improbability of this object resting in your hand, cooling your palm with its condensation, we must rewind the clock. We must go back not just to the factory or the mine, but to the very furnace of the cosmos. Before I was a vessel for your pale ale or your cola, I was stardust, literally. The atoms of aluminum that form the rigid, shiny skin of this can were forged in the violet violence of a dying star billions of years ago. Unlike hydrogen or helium born of the Big Bang, I required the crushing weight of a stellar collapse to exist. When that star exploded in a supernova, it scattered my atoms across the vacuum, drifting for eons until gravity pulled me into a swirling nebula that would become your solar system. I was baked into the crust of the Earth, locked away in reddish clay called bauxite, waiting for a species clever enough to set me free. For most of human history, I hid in plain sight. I was the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, yet I was invisible, chemically locked to oxygen with a bond so strong that fire alone could not break it. While humans played with copper, bronze, and iron, I remained elusive. It wasn't until the 19th century that I was finally isolated, and for a brief shining moment, I was the most precious metal on the planet. This is the part of my history that usually shocks the modern consumer, throwing me into a recycling bin. In the 1850s, I was worth more than gold. Napoleon III of France, the nephew of the great Bonaparte, held banquets where the most honored guests were served on aluminum plates, while the lesser nobility had to suffer the indignity of eating off mere gold and silver. I was a symbol of ultimate luxury and technological dominance. When the Americans finished the Washington Monument in 1884, they wanted to crown it with something that represented the pinnacle of human engineering and wealth. They didn't choose gold, they chose me. A 100-ounce pyramid of pure aluminum was placed at the very tip of the obelisk. At the time, that small chunk of metal was the largest single casting of aluminum in the world. It sat there, gleaming against the Virginia sky, a testament to rarity. Back then, if you had told a banker in New York that in 100 years people would use this semi-precious metal to hold cheap beer and then casually toss it onto the roadside, they would have declared you insane. But then, everything changed. Two men, Charles Hall in Ohio and Paul Héroult in France, simultaneously unlocked the secret to my abundance. They realized that electricity, violent and massive amounts of it, was the key to ripping me away from oxygen. Suddenly, I went from being the metal of kings to the metal of the people. I became the skin of the Zeppelin, the skeleton of the fighter jet, and eventually, the vessel for the American dream. The Cold War and the Pop-Top Revolution. When the fires of World War II finally burned out, I returned home a hero. I had been the skin of the B-29 Superfortress and the skeleton of the P-51 Mustang. I had proven that I was lighter than steel and tougher than wood. But the smelters of Alcoa and Reynolds were still roaring, churning out tons of metal with no more wars to fight. The industry needed a new battlefield, and they found it in the American kitchen. In the 1950s, the beverage world was a heavy, clanking place. Soda and beer lived primarily in glass bottles, or, starting in 1935, in tin cans. But let's be clear, those early cans were imposters. They were made of steel, lined with a heavy coating of pitch to keep the metal from reacting with the liquid.
They were three-piece monstrosities, a flat sheet rolled into a cylinder and welded, with a top and bottom stamped on. They were heavy, they rusted, and they required a tool to access. If you wanted a drink and a picnic in 1955 and forgot your church key, that triangular metal opener, you were out of luck. You'd be staring at a sealed steel fortress, thirsty and defeated. The revolution began in Golden, Colorado. Bill Coors, a man with a vision as clear as Rocky Mountain water, hated the steel can. He hated the metallic taste it sometimes imparted to his lager, and he hated the waste. He looked at me, aluminum, and saw the future. In 1959, the Coors Brewing Company did something radical. They introduced the first all-aluminum two-piece beverage can. It was a marvel of engineering. Instead of rolling a sheet and welding it, a machine took a small hockey puck-sized slug of aluminum and slammed it with a punch press. In a fraction of a second, the metal flowed like liquid, shooting up the sides of the punch to form a seamless cup. It was lighter, it chilled faster, and it held the carbonation without the risk of rust. But the true cultural explosion happened in Dayton, Ohio, thanks to a man named Ermel Fraze. Legend has it that Fraze was at a family picnic and wanted a beer. He had the can, but he had forgotten his church key. Forced to use a car bumper to open it up, he swore he would find a better way. He invented the pull tab. It was a simple aluminum ring riveted to the lid. You pulled it, and a teardrop-shaped piece of metal ripped away, opening the can. No tools required. It was the democratization of refreshment. By 1965, 75% of American breweries had adopted the pull tab. Suddenly, the psh sound was born. I was everywhere. I was in the hands of GIs in Vietnam, cooling down after patrol. I was in the coolers
of families driving down Route 66. I was the vessel of Pepsi and Coke in the Great Cola Wars. I became a canvas for American pop art, adorned with bright logos and slogans. However, this convenience came with a dark side. The pull tabs, those razor-sharp strips of metal, were detachable. People ripped them off and threw them on the ground. Beaches, parks, and sidewalks were littered with millions of sharp aluminum tongues waiting to slice a bare foot. It was an environmental disaster in the making, and I, the miracle metal, was becoming a villain. The scar on the heel and the 60-day resurrection. By the mid-1970s, I was suffering from an identity crisis. I was the king of convenience, but I was also a public menace. The detached ring pulls were everywhere. They choked wildlife, clogged vacuum cleaners, and most famously, sliced open the feet of beachgoers. The cultural backlash was immortalized in song. When Jimmy Buffett sang about blowing out his flip-flop after stepping on a pop-top in 1977, every American knew exactly the pain he was describing. State legislatures began threatening to ban me. I needed to evolve, or I would be legislated out of existence. Salvation came from an engineer named Daniel Kudzik at Reynolds Metals. In 1975, he patented the Stay-On tab. It was a moment of origami-like genius. Instead of ripping the metal off, the tab acted as a lever to push the scored metal down into the can, while the tab itself remained attached to the lid. No more litter. No more sharp, weaponized metal strips. It took a few years to catch on. Early versions were hard to push, and people complained about pushing the dirty metal into the beer. But by the early 80s, the design was universal. I had reached my final, perfect form. But this story isn't just about how I lived. It is about how I died, or rather, how I refused to die. Here is the most astonishing fact about my existence. I am immortal. Plastic bottles degrade. Paper fibers shorten and weaken every time they're recycled. Glass breaks and is heavy to transport. But I am aluminum.
My atoms are not damaged by the recycling process. You can melt me down, recast me, and turn me back into a can 1,000,000,000 times, and I will be exactly as strong and shiny the 1,000,000th time as I was the first. Let's walk through my death. You finish your soda. You crush me in your hand, a satisfying crumple of 0.003-inch thick walls, and you toss me into a blue bin. This is where the magic begins. I am taken to a material recovery facility, a chaotic, loud cathedral of trash. I travel on conveyor belts surrounded by my enemies, plastic wrappers, cardboard boxes, and glass shards. But the humans have a special trick to find me. It is called the eddy-current separator. At the end of the belt, a powerful magnet spins inside a non-magnetic drum at high speed. This creates a magnetic field that reacts with the aluminum. Even though I am not magnetic myself, magnets don't stick to me. This field creates a repulsive force. As I reach the end of the belt, while the heavy glass drops and the plastic falls flat, I am literally launched into the air. I fly across a gap, separating myself from the garbage, diving into a bin of pure, clean aluminum. It is a leap of faith that saves my life. From there, I am crushed into a massive bale, a cube of thousands of cans weighing over a ton. I am shipped to a furnace and heated to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The paint, the lacquer, and the soda residue vanish in an instant, vaporized by the heat. I return to my liquid state, glowing a bright, angry orange. This is the closed loop. It is so efficient that the aluminum can you buy at a 7-Eleven today could be the exact same metal from a can you recycled just 60 days ago. That is the timeline, from the recycling bin, to the furnace, to the rolling mill, to the beverage factory, to the store shelf, and back to your hand. 60 days. While you were living 2 months of your life, I died, melted, was reborn, filled, and shipped back to you. The pressure vessel and the invisible diet. If you're holding a full can right now, squeeze it. It feels hard rock, doesn't it? You are holding a pressure vessel that rivals the engineering of a spacecraft. Inside that thin metal skin, the carbon dioxide is pushing outward with a force of up to 90 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, the tires on a NASCAR race car are inflated to about 20 to 50 psi. I am holding back explosive pressure 3 times greater than the tire of a car moving at 200 miles per hour, and I am doing it with walls that are thinner than a human hair. This is the miracle of my modern form. I am an architectural wonder disguised as garbage. If you flip me over, you'll see a concave dome at the bottom. That isn't a stylistic choice. If my bottom were flat, the internal pressure of the soda would bulge it out like a balloon, and I wouldn't be able to stand upright on a shelf. That dome is an arch, the strongest structure known to architecture, borrowed from the Romans to keep your cola stable. But the most obsessive quest of my life has been lightweighting. In the beverage industry, weight is the enemy. Weight costs money to ship. In the 1960s, I was a chubby vessel, weighing nearly 3 ounces or 85 grams. Today, I weigh less than half an ounce, about 13 grams. Engineers have ruthlessly shaved away every unnecessary microgram of metal. Notice the top of the can. It's smaller than the middle. That's called necking. The lid is made of a different, harder alloy than the body, making it the most expensive part of the can. By shrinking the diameter of the opening just a fraction of an inch, the industry saves millions of pounds of aluminum a year. I am the result of billions of dollars of research, all designed to make me as close to nothing as possible while still existing.
However, despite my perfection, there is a tragedy in my story. Remember the recycling loop? It saves 95% of the energy required to make me. Let me repeat that, 95%. To make a can from virgin ore
digging the red bauxite out of the earth in Australia or Jamaica, shipping it, refining it into white alumina powder, and then blasting it with electricity to create metal requires a colossal amount of energy. It is like burning a tank of gasoline just to make a coffee cup. But when you recycle me, that energy cost vanishes. Remelting me takes only 5% of the energy. I am effectively a battery of stored energy. Every time you throw me in the trash instead of the recycling bin, you are throwing away the energy equivalent of half a can of gasoline. You are burying a miracle. And in the United States, sadly, about 50 billion of my brothers and sisters are buried in landfills every year. There we sit in the dark, perfectly preserved, waiting for a future archaeologist to dig us up and wonder why a civilization that could build such a perfect object was so foolish as to bury it. The ghost in the shell and the craft beer renaissance. There is one final secret I must confess, a hidden truth that sits literally on the tip of your tongue. You think you are drinking from aluminum, but you are not. If your tongue actually touched bare aluminum while you drank your cola or your IPA, the reaction would be immediate and unpleasant. The acid in the soda would react with the metal, creating a battery-like galvanic charge that would taste like licking a 9-volt battery. Worse, the acid would eat through my thin walls in a matter of days, causing me to leak all over the pantry. So, how do I survive? I am lined with a ghost. Inside every single aluminum can is a microscopic layer of epoxy lacquer or polymer thinner than a human cell. During my creation, after I am washed and dried, a spray gun descends into my hollow body and spins at a dizzying speed, coating my interior with this protective varnish. If you were to carefully dissolve the aluminum metal of a filled Coke can with a specific acid, the liquid would not spill. It would remain held in a ghostly, flexible, transparent plastic bag, the liner that was hiding inside me all along. This invisible shield is the only reason the modern beverage industry exists. For decades, this industrial efficiency made me the vessel of choice for mass-produced cheap lagers. I was the symbol of quantity over quality, the Joe six-pack. If you wanted real beer, you bought glass bottles. I was seen as the poor relation, the tinny container for tailgates and frat parties. But in the early 2000s, a cultural shift occurred that changed my social standing forever, the craft beer revolution. Brewers, obsessed with flavor, realized something that the marketing departments had ignored. Light is the enemy of beer. When light hits the hops in beer, it triggers a chemical reaction that creates the exact same compound found in a skunk spray. Glass bottles, even brown ones, let some light in, but I am a fortress of total darkness. I am hermetically sealed. Oxygen, the other enemy of freshness, cannot creep past my double-seamed lid. Suddenly, the tall boy, the 16-ounce pint can, became the canvas for high art. No longer just a silver cylinder with a red logo, I became wrapped in matte-finished shrink sleeves, adorned with psychedelic art, puns, and intricate illustrations. I went from the bottom shelf of the gas station to the top shelf of the boutique bottle shop. I became premium. I became cool. And now, as the world turns its eyes toward the crisis of plastic pollution, I am being called upon once again. Plastic bottles drift in the Pacific Ocean, breaking into microplastics that will last for centuries. But I do not drift. I have value. I am hunted by scrappers, sorted by machines, and craved by furnaces. This story brings us back to this exact moment. You tilt your head back. The last drop of liquid rolls over the polymer liner and onto your tongue. The can is empty. The pressure is gone. The structural integrity remains, but the purpose is fulfilled. You are standing over a bin. In one hand, you hold the remnants of a star, a 12-ounce miracle of engineering that was once a mountain in Jamaica, then a car door in Detroit, and now a hollow shell in your grip. You have a choice. If you throw me in the trash, I will go to a landfill. I will sit there, shiny and perfect, buried under layers of rotting avocado skins and dirty diapers, trapped in the dark for 500 years, a wasted battery of energy. But if you drop me in the recycling bin, I will be back. I will see the fire again. I will melt, flow, and be reborn. In 60 days, I could be the wing of a Tesla. I could be the frame of an iPhone. Or perhaps I will find my way back to your hand on a hot summer day with that familiar psh, crack, ready to tell the story all over again. The Great Harvest and the Wings of War. You made the right choice. You dropped me into the recycling bin. As I slide down the chute and hear the roar of the furnace once more, the heat triggers a memory deep within my atomic lattice. I told you I was immortal, that I have lived 1 billion lives. While my life as a beverage can is a modern luxury, my most heroic era wasn't spent holding beer. It was spent saving the world. Let us drift back to 1941. The United States had just entered World War II, and suddenly I was the most critical metal on Earth. President Franklin Roosevelt didn't just need soldiers, he needed me. Aluminum was the only metal light enough to allow planes to fly long distances and carry heavy bombs, yet strong enough to survive anti-aircraft fire. But there was a problem. America didn't have enough of me.
This sparked one of the most emotional and fascinating home front efforts in American history, the Aluminum for Defense drive. Imagine the scene in a small town in Kansas or a bustling neighborhood in Brooklyn. It was a scorching summer in 1941. Mayors, Boy Scouts, and movie stars rallied the public. The message was simple: turn your old pots and pans into Spitfires and Blenheims. Americans ransacked their kitchens. They pulled out battered kettles, worn-out skillets, and even cocktail shakers. In city squares across the nation, massive piles of household aluminum began to rise like silver mountains. In New York City alone, thousands of pounds were piled up in Times Square, guarded by police as if it were gold bullion. It was a psychological masterpiece. It made every housewife and child feel like they were on the front lines. However, here's a historical secret that few people know. Most of those pots and pans were never actually turned into airplanes. The alloy used for cookware, 3000 series, is different from the high-strength alloy needed for aircraft skin, 2000 and 7000 series, mixed with copper and zinc. You couldn't just melt a frying pan and make a wing for a P-51 Mustang. The chemistry was wrong. So what happened to all those donations? They were largely used for non-critical military parts, canteens, mess kits, and parts of tanks, freeing up the virgin aluminum for the aircraft. But the drive served a greater purpose. It mobilized the American spirit.
The blur of the bodymaker and the great CanDemic. We must descend from the silence of interstellar space to the deafening roar of the modern factory floor. To understand my life today, you have to witness the violence of my birth. If you were to stand inside a modern canning plant owned by titans like the Ball Corporation or Crown Holdings, you would not see individual cans being made. You would see a blur of silver light. The machines that make me, known as body makers, operate at speeds that the human eye literally cannot track. A single production line pumps out 2,000 to 2,500 cans per minute. That is 40 cans every single second. It is a continuous screaming river of metal. The punch press hits the aluminum slug with 50 tons of force, drawing the metal out into a cup, ironing the walls thin and trimming the jagged edges, all faster than you can blink. It is a ballet of industrial violence, choreographed to the microsecond. If a machine falls out of sync by a fraction of a millimeter, the metal tears, the line jams, and thousands of dollars are lost in seconds. For decades, this system was a well-oiled machine, predicting American thirst with scary accuracy.
The manufacturers knew exactly how much beer you would drink on Super Bowl Sunday and how much soda you would buy for Christmas. But then came the year the world stopped, 2020. Historians call it the COVID-19 pandemic. In my world, we call it the CanDemic. Overnight, the bars, stadiums, and restaurants of America shut their doors. The draft beer taps went dry. The kegs, the stainless steel barrels used to serve large crowds, sat gathering dust. But Americans did not stop drinking. In fact, trapped in their homes, they drank more. But they couldn't drink from a tap. They needed me. The demand shifted violently from on-premise, bars, restaurants, to off-premise, grocery stores, liquor stores. The aluminum industry, which runs on tight margins and lean inventory, was hit by a tsunami of demand. Suddenly, the impossible happened. America ran out of cans. Craft brewers, who rely almost exclusively on aluminum cans because they are cheaper and better for shipping than glass, were in a panic. They had tanks full of fresh IPA, but nothing to put it in. The giant soda companies had to make ruthless choices. They stopped making niche flavors, sorry to the fans of cherry vanilla Dr. Pepper or caffeine-free Diet Coke, to focus all their remaining aluminum on the core products. It got so desperate that the United States, the birthplace of the aluminum industry, had to start airlifting empty cans from around the world. Imagine the irony. Massive cargo jets flying from Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and South Korea, filled not with gold or medicine, but with empty aluminum cans, just to keep the shelves of Walmart and Kroger stocked. This crisis revealed a secret ruler of the industry. You probably know the name Ball from the glass mason jars your grandmother used for canning pickles, but the Ball Corporation long ago moved away from glass. Today, they are the undisputed kings of the aluminum can, as well as a major aerospace contractor. They make the satellites that track the weather and the cans that hold your beer. During the shortage, they were the gatekeepers. If you were a small brewery and you didn't have a contract, you were out of luck. The shortage forced a reckoning. It highlighted how fragile the just-in-time supply chain really was. But it also proved my dominance. When the chips were down and the world was in crisis, nobody clamored for glass bottles. They wanted the stackable, shippable, durable, unbreakable aluminum can. I had become essential infrastructure, as vital as electricity or the internet. The street value and the Seinfeld stratagem. I am the only piece of trash you will ever throw away that is essentially a check made out to cash. Think about it. If you throw away a plastic yogurt cup, it has negative value. It costs the city money to pick it up, sort it, and try to find a buyer for the degraded plastic. But I am different. I am a commodity. I have a price per pound on the London Metal Exchange. This intrinsic value has created an entire sub-economy on the streets of America. In cities like New York, San Francisco, and Chicago, there are armies of canners, people who survive by hunting me down. They wake up before dawn, scouring the curbs on recycling day, diving into public bins, listening for the telltale rattle of my empty shell. To you, I am garbage. To them, I am rent money. I am groceries. In states with bottle bills, I am worth a guaranteed nickel or dime. This brings us to a specific quirk of American legislation that defines my life cycle, the deposit laws. It started in Oregon in 1971. People were sick of seeing me littering the beautiful Pacific Northwest highways, so they put a bounty on my head, 5 cents. If you brought me back, you got your nickel back. It worked. Suddenly, recycling wasn't just a moral act, it was a financial transaction. But Michigan is the holy land of the aluminum can. They set the deposit at 10 cents. This price discrepancy is so famous it became the plot of a legendary Seinfeld episode, The Bottle Deposit, where Newman and Kramer schemed to drive a mail truck full of cans from New York, 5 cents, to Michigan, 10 cents, to arbitrage the difference. While the math in the show was shaky, the cultural impact was real. I am the only object in your pantry that carries a legislative bounty on its head.
But despite my value, and despite the fact that 75% of all aluminum ever produced is still in use today, we have a problem. We are not recycling enough. In Brazil, the recycling rate for aluminum cans is nearly 100%. In the United States, it hovers tragically around 50%. This means that for every can you recycle, another one is buried in a landfill. This is a tragedy of geology, because when you don't recycle me, the humans have to go back to the source. They have to go back to the bauxite. Mining my raw ore is a violent affair. It usually happens in a tropical belt, places like Guinea, Jamaica, and Australia. Massive strip mines tear open the red earth. To get the alumina out, the ore is treated with caustic soda, leaving behind a toxic sludge known as red mud. For every ton of aluminum produced, 2 tons of this red alkaline slurry are created. It sits in massive holding ponds, a festering scar on the landscape. This is why I beg you to use the blue bin. Every time you recycle me, you stop a mine from expanding. You keep the red mud in the ground. You save 95% of the carbon emissions. It is a simple equation. We are now seeing a strange new trend in your supermarkets: water. For decades, water was sold in clear plastic, but the tide is turning. Brands like Liquid Death are putting mountain water into tall boy aluminum cans, marketing them with heavy metal fonts and skulls. Why? Because plastic is becoming a pariah. The world has realized that plastic is forever in the worst way, breaking down into microparticles that choke the fish and enter your own bloodstream. I am the answer to the plastic crisis. I do not degrade into poison. I oxidize and return to the earth as harmless metal, or better yet, I return to the furnace to be born again. I am the once and future king of the beverage aisle. The Vikings fire and the nitrogen bomb. You might think of me as an all-American object. I am the vessel of Budweiser and Coca-Cola, after all. But if you look at my passport, I am a seasoned world traveler before I ever reached the bottling plant. My creation story is a lesson in global macroeconomics and the hunt for cheap power. It starts in the tropics, Jamaica, Brazil, or Guinea, where the red dirt is dug up. But the magic happens in the cold. To turn that white alumina powder into molten metal, you need electricity, massive, terrifying amounts of it. It takes so much power that it is too expensive to do it just anywhere. So the industry ships me to the land of fire and ice, Iceland. In the shadow of active volcanoes and glaciers, massive smelters harness the geothermal energy of the earth to electrocute the oxygen out of me. If you're drinking a soda in New York, there is a very high chance the aluminum in your hand was born in a potline in Reykjavik, powered by steam from the Earth's core. I am, in a poetic sense, a battery of solidified volcanic energy shipped across the Atlantic to keep your beverage cold. But let's talk about one of the strangest things humans have ever put inside me. For decades, I was a simple vessel. I held liquid and gas. But in the late 1980s, the brewers of Guinness had a problem. They wanted to sell their stout in a can, but stout requires a creamy head, which is usually created by nitrogen gas, not carbon dioxide. Nitrogen bubbles are smaller and more stable, giving that velvet texture. But nitrogen doesn't dissolve well in liquid under pressure like CO2 does. If you just put stout in a normal can, it tastes flat and lifeless. So they invented a cyborg implant for me, the widget. If you shake a can of Guinness or Boddington's, you hear a rattle. That is a hollow plastic sphere, or sometimes a rocket shape, inside me. It is a piece of genius engineering. The sphere has a microscopic hole in it. During the canning process, liquid nitrogen is added. The can is sealed instantly. The pressure forces beer and gas into that hollow sphere. Here's the magic trick.
When you pull the tab, psst, the pressure inside the can drops to 0 instantly. But the pressure inside that little plastic sphere is still high. It shoots a jet of pressurized beer and nitrogen out of that tiny hole, agitating the liquid like a mini explosion. This violent release creates millions of tiny bubbles, replicating the effect of a bartender pulling a draft handle. For a brief moment, the inside of that can is a chaotic storm of physics, and it works. It changed the way the world viewed canned beer. I was no longer just for fizz. I could do creamy. I could do draft quality. This innovation sparked a race for what we call active packaging. I am no longer just a dumb bucket. I am becoming smart. There are now cans with temperature-sensitive ink that turns blue when the beer is cold enough to drink. The mountains turn blue, as the Coors commercials famously promised. This is done with thermochromic pigments, a technology originally developed for mood rings and thermometers, now used to prevent you from drinking warm lager. And the future is even wilder. We are experimenting with resalable ends, sliding mechanisms that let you close the can back up to save the carbonation. We are looking at digital printing, where every single can on the shelf has a unique piece of art generated by an algorithm so that no two cans are alike. But amidst all this technology, the widget, the smart ink, and the global shipping, one thing remains the ultimate enemy of my existence. It is not rust. It is not crushing. It is the simple, humble dent.
Because I am a pressure vessel, my structural integrity relies on my cylindrical shape. A perfect cylinder is incredibly strong. You can stand on an empty soda can if you balance your weight perfectly. But tap the side with a pencil, crunch. The wall buckles instantly. In the factory, if a can gets a micro dent on the rim during the filling process, the seal will fail. The gas will escape. The can will go soft. A soft can is a dead can. It is pulled off the line by automated sensors and sent straight back to the scrap heap to be melted down. I must be perfect, or I am nothing. The chemical ghost and the Pavlovian pop. We must revisit the ghost I mentioned earlier, the invisible liner that keeps the liquid from touching my metal skin. For decades, this liner was a miracle of chemistry, an epoxy resin made with a compound called bisphenol A, or BPA. It was tough, flexible, and cheap. It saved millions of people from botulism and metallic poisoning. But in the early 2010s, the mood shifted. Science began to suggest that BPA was an endocrine disruptor, a chemical mimic that could trick the human body into thinking it was seeing the hormone estrogen. Suddenly, the miracle liner became a pariah. Panic spread through the aisles of Whole Foods and Target. Moms threw out baby bottles, hikers tossed their polycarbonate water bottles. And there I sat, the aluminum can, quietly harboring the same chemical in my lining. The industry faced an existential crisis. If they removed the BPA, the new liner might fail. If it failed, the soda would eat through the can, leak onto shelves, or spoil. It was a high-stakes chemical tightrope walk. Billions of dollars were poured into research to develop BPA-NI liners. Today, most cans you hold in the U.S. use acrylic or polyester-based coatings that are free of the controversial chemical. I evolved again, not visibly on the outside, but invisibly on the inside, adapting to the biological fears of the species that created me. But while you worry about what is inside me, you are likely addicted to the sound of opening me. Neuromarketers, the scientists who study how your brain reacts to products, have discovered that the sound of a can opening is one of the most powerful auditory triggers in the world. That specific psh crack is not just noise, it is a dopamine trigger. It is a Pavlovian bell. Over years of conditioning, your brain has associated that sound with the rush of sugar from a soda or the relaxation of alcohol from a beer. When you hear it, even from across the room, your mouth literally begins to water.
You crave the reward before you even taste it. Beverage companies know this. They obsess over it. The size of the opening, the shape of the tab, and the pressure inside are all calibrated to ensure the pop is satisfying. A dull thud suggests flatness or cheapness. A sharp crack suggests freshness and carbonation. In Japan, engineers have even designed cans with specific ridges on the lid to alter the acoustic frequency of the pop to make it sound more refreshing. I am not just a container, I am a musical instrument of consumption. Compare this to the plastic bottle. The plastic bottle opens with a jagged crack hiss of a twisting cap. It feels utilitarian. It feels cheap. It lacks the finality, the commitment of the aluminum tab. Once you pop a can, there is no going back. You have committed to the drink. In a world of endless options and hesitancy, the aluminum can demands a decision. And this psychological edge is why, despite the rise of pouches and boxes and biodegradable plastics, I remain the king. I am a sensory experience. The cold metal against your palm. Aluminum transfers heat away from your hand faster than glass or plastic, making the drink feel colder than it actually is. The bright artwork, the satisfying sound, and the flow of the liquid. As we approach the end of my story, we must look at the battlefield of the future. The war on waste is heating up. Plastic is losing the public relations war. Glass is too heavy and energy-intensive to transport in a warming world. I am standing on the precipice of a new golden age. But there is a final hurdle, a strange twist of fate involving the very thing that makes me valuable, my size. For decades, the 12-ounce can was the standard. It was the canonical unit of American thirst. But look at the shelves today. They are fragmenting. We have the skinny, sleek cans for hard seltzers, signaling low calorie. We have the massive 24-ounce stovepipes for convenience stores. We have tiny 8-ounce minis for mixer sodas. I am shape-shifting. The standard form is dying, replaced by a family of aluminum shapes, each targeting a specific demographic tribe. I am no longer just one thing. I am a legion. The urban mine and the rise of the robots. We have spoken of the deep mines in the tropics where my life begins, but there is another mine, one that is far richer and closer to home. It is called the urban mine. If you look at a city like New York or Los Angeles, you are not just seeing buildings and streets, you are seeing a massive above-ground deposit of purified metal. There is more accessible aluminum sitting in the scrapyards, driveways, and recycling bins of American cities than there is in many natural bauxite mines. The challenge is no longer digging it up. The challenge is sorting it out. For decades, this job was done by humans. Men and women stood alongside conveyor belts in loud, smelly facilities, snatching cans out of a stream of dirty diapers and pizza boxes and broken glass. It was dangerous, miserable work, but the machines are waking up. We are entering the era of the AI sorter. Today, in advanced recovery facilities, cameras equipped with artificial intelligence watch the trash belt with unblinking eyes. They can identify the specific logo of a Diet Coke can, the crinkle of a Coors Light can, or the sheen of a cat food tin in milliseconds. Then, robotic arms, moving faster than a striking cobra, snatch me from the belt using suction or compressed air. These robots don't get tired. They don't get tetanus. They ensure that I am separated from the plastics that would contaminate my melt. This purity is essential because I have a new rival for the world's aluminum supply, the automobile. In 2015, the Ford company took a gamble that shook the industrial world. They decided to make the body of the F-150, the best-selling vehicle in American history, out of aluminum instead of steel. They called it military grade, a marketing term for the same 6000 series alloys used in aerospace and, yes, sometimes in beverage cans. Suddenly, the demand for recycled aluminum skyrocketed.
The sheet of metal that makes the hood of a pickup truck needs to be light to save gas or battery range for EVs, but it needs to be strong. Ford and other automakers realized that digging new aluminum out of the ground was too expensive and carbon intensive. They wanted me. They wanted the post-consumer scrap. There is a very real chance that the can you recycle today will not come back as a can. It might come back as the door of a Ford Lightning or the casing of an Apple MacBook. Apple has famously created a robot named Daisy to disassemble iPhones and recover the aluminum, but they also buy vast amounts of recycled scrap. I am becoming the skeleton of the digital age. But here comes a tension. The beverage companies want me back as a can to keep their closed-loop promises. The car companies want me for doors. The tech companies want me for laptops. I am the belle of the ball, the most courted material on the periodic table. This competition has led to the rise of green aluminum. In the past, all aluminum was the same. Now, metal produced with renewable energy, like hydro in Canada or Iceland, or recycled metal, is sold at a premium. It comes with a certificate. I am no longer just a commodity. I am a moral choice. A can made with coal-fired Chinese aluminum is seen as dirty. A can made from 100% recycled American scrap is clean. The atoms are identical, but the story and the carbon footprint is vastly different. And yet, despite my high status, I often end up on a boat. The United States generates more aluminum scrap than it can process. We pack millions of crushed cans into shipping containers and send them across the ocean to India, South Korea, and Malaysia. There, they are melted down in conditions that are sometimes less than regulated, only to be sold back to the U.S. as new metal. It is a chaotic, global merry-go-round of trash. But the most astonishing thing is what happens when the system works perfectly. When you drop me in a recycling bin in a place like St. Louis, I can be melted, rolled, stamped, filled, and back on a shelf in a store in Chicago in 60 days. I am the phoenix of the supermarket. I am the only object in your life that can die and be reborn 6 times a year forever.
The silent witness and the archaeology of the future. As we near the end of this odyssey, consider the sheer magnitude of my presence in your life. In the United States alone, approximately 100 billion of my kind are produced every single year. That is about 300 cans for every man, woman, and child in the country. We are, by sheer volume, one of the most successful manufactured objects in the history of the species. But numbers are cold. My true value lies in the moments I have witnessed. Because I am cheap, portable, and disposable, I am invited to every event in American life. I was there at the tailgate party before the Super Bowl, crushed against a forehead in celebration. I was there at the lonely truck stop at 3 a.m., holding the energy drink that kept a driver awake on the long haul to Memphis. I was the first beer a father shared with his son on a fishing trip, and I was the cheap soda a college student could afford while studying for finals. I am the silent witness to your joys and your sorrows. I am the social lubricant of the working class and the craft experience of the hipster elite. I bridge the gap between the welder and the stockbroker. When you hold me, you are holding a common denominator of American culture. Now, project your mind forward, far forward. Imagine the year 3025. If our civilization collapses, what will remain? Wood rots. Iron rusts away to red dust. Plastic, the great pretender, will break down into microscopic polymers, leaving a toxic layer in the soil, but losing its shape. But aluminum? Aluminum oxidizes, yes. A thin layer of white rust forms on my surface, but this actually protects the metal underneath. If I am buried in a landfill today, uncrushed and protected from the crushing weight of a bulldozer, I will be there in 1,000 years.
future archaeologists digging through the strata of the Anthropocene, the age of humans, will find me. They will find the faded logos of Coca-Cola and Monster Energy. They will marvel at the precision of the manufacturing, the seamless walls, and the complex alloy chemistry. They might conclude that I was a religious object, a totem used in daily rituals. And in a way, they wouldn't be wrong. The ritual of the purchase, the opening, the drinking, and the crushing is the heartbeat of modern consumption. But you have the power to change that archaeological record. You can ensure that I do not end up as a static artifact in the dirt. The story of the aluminum can is the story of potential. I am potential energy. I am potential value. I am a cloud of electrons and protons that has been temporarily forced into the shape of a cylinder. I am restless. I want to move. I want to burn. I want to fly. When you finish reading this, you might stand up and walk to the fridge. You might crack open a cold one. As the gas hisses and the metal cools your hand, remember where I came from. Remember the dying stars, the tropical mines, the volcanic smelters of Iceland, the warplanes of 1944, and the moon landing. Remember the recycling plant and the 60-day resurrection. Do not break the chain. Do not bury the miracle. Drink deep. Crush the can. And then, with a simple flick of your wrist, toss me into the blue bin. I will see you again soon. The Inferno of Rebirth and the Alloy Alchemist. The darkness of the recycling bin does not last long. I am tipped into the roaring belly of a truck, crushed against thousands of my kin. We are a mosaic of brands, soda, beer, sparkling water, but soon these labels will mean nothing. We are arriving at the secondary smelter, the place where identities are erased and new purposes are forged. If you thought the bottling plant was loud, the smelter is a vision of Hades. I am dumped onto a conveyor belt and shredded. Teeth of hardened steel tear me into confetti. The paint, the lacquer, the little widget floating inside, it is all ripped apart. I am no longer a can. I am shred. But before I can become liquid, I must be purified. I pass through a decoating kiln, a rotating oven that heats me just enough to vaporize the paint and the plastic liner without melting the metal. This is the moment the ghost leaves the machine. The smoke of burnt logos rises, leaving behind only the naked shimmering silver of pure aluminum. Then the plunge. I fall into the furnace. The heat is absolute. At 1220 degrees Fahrenheit, my solid form surrenders. The crystalline structure of my atoms unlocks, and I become a liquid mirror. I am a pool of glowing, molten potential. But here is the catch. I cannot simply be poured back into a mold to make a new can immediately. Chemistry is strict. The alloy of my body, mostly manganese and magnesium, is perfect for a can, but today the market demands something else. The operators of the furnace, modern-day alchemists wearing silver suits and face shields, take samples of my liquid blood. They analyze my atomic makeup with spectrometers. Too much magnesium, the computer says, not enough silicon. They are not making cans today, they are making cars. To change my destiny, they add spice to the soup. They toss in ingots of pure virgin aluminum to dilute me. They add precise amounts of silicon and copper. I am being transmuted from the 3000 series alloy of a beverage container to the 6000 series alloy of structural automotive components. It is a promotion. I am graduating from the pantry to the highway. I am cast into a massive log, 20 feet long and perfectly round. I cool, solidifying into a harder version of myself. I am loaded onto a flatbed truck and shipped to a rolling mill in Kentucky. Here, the violence is different. It is not the punch press of the can maker, it is the crushing weight of rollers. I am heated until I am soft, then forced through steel cylinders that squeeze me thinner and thinner. I scream in the way metal screams, with high-pitched atomic stress as I am stretched into a sheet. I am destined for a stamping plant in Dearborn, Michigan. The Ford F-150, the beast of American labor, is shedding its heavy steel skin for a lighter, rust-proof aluminum body. I am about to become the left front fender of a pickup truck. The stamping press descends with the force of a falling building. Wham! In a split second, I am bent, curved, and shaped. I have aerodynamics now. I have style. I am painted a deep metallic blue, antimatter blue, they call it. I am bolted onto the chassis. An engine roars into life, or perhaps in this modern age, a battery hums. I roll off the assembly line, gleaming under the factory lights. I am no longer a disposable vessel for 12 ounces of soda. I am a shield. I am a machine. I will face hail, gravel, salt, and sun. I will last for 20 years, not 20 minutes. I drive out of the factory gates, the wind rushing over my new curves. The radio plays. The driver rests his arm on the windowsill, my top edge, and in his hand he holds a can of Coke. I feel the vibration of the road. I see the reflection of the sky. I am the aluminum phoenix, and my second life has just begun. The highway star and the oxide shield. Life as a truck fender is a meditation on endurance. As a soda can, my purpose was fleeting, a brief chill, a snap, a gulp, and the darkness of the bin. But as part of a Ford F-150, I am a gladiator. I live in the wind. I feel the slap of Louisiana rain, the sting of Arizona sand, and the biting caress of Minnesota road salt. This is where my atomic magic truly shines. If I were made of steel, the salt on the roads of the Midwest would be my death sentence. Iron, when exposed to oxygen and water, bleeds red. It rusts, it crumbles, it disintegrates. But aluminum?
Phoenix, and my second life is just begun. The highway star and the oxide shield. Life as a truck fender is a meditation on endurance. As a soda can, my purpose was fleeting. A brief chill, a snap, a gulp, and the darkness of the bin. But as part of a Ford F-150, I am a gladiator. I live in the wind. I feel the slap of Louisiana rain, the sting of Arizona sand, and the biting caress of Minnesota road salt. This is where my atomic magic truly shines. If I were made of steel, the salt on the roads of the Midwest would be my death sentence. Iron, when exposed to oxygen and water, bleeds red. It rusts. It flakes away until it is dust. But I am aluminum. When oxygen touches me, I do not bleed. I heal. Instantaneously, upon exposure to air, I form a microscopic layer of aluminum oxide. It is hard, transparent, and chemically inert. It seals the metal beneath it like a sapphire skin. If a stone kicks up from the highway and chips my paint, exposing the raw metal, I do not rot. I simply breathe in the oxygen, reform my shield, and carry on. I am self-healing armor. This is why the Land Rover Defenders of the 1950s are still found in African deserts, and why the Grumman postal trucks are still delivering mail after 30 years. We do not surrender to the elements. For 15 years I serve. I carry a contractor to job sites in Texas, my bed filled with lumber and concrete. I feel the vibration of heavy loads, the torque of the engine. I save him money every mile. Because I am 700 pounds lighter than my steel ancestors, the engine doesn't have to work as hard. I am the reason he gets that extra mile per gallon. I am efficiency in motion. Then I am sold. I pass to a teenager in Ohio. I am covered in mud during weekend off-roading. I am leaned against at bonfires. I bear the dents of a life well lived. A shopping cart in a Walmart parking lot. a fence post in a snowy driveway. Each dent is a memory, a deformation of my crystal lattice that stays with me. But all machines, even the aluminum ones, eventually die. The engine fails, the transmission slips, the cost to fix the beast outweighs its value. I am driven one last time, limping and coughing, to a place of silence, the auto salvage yard. Here I sit among the rows of the dead. Weeds grow through the engine bay. The sun bleaches the antimatter blue paint. Parts are stripped away, the alternator, the seats, the radio, like vultures picking a carcass. But I remain, the fender, the hood, the body. For 5 years I sit in the rain. The steel cars around me turn orange and crumble, but I remain, silver gray under the peeling paint. I am waiting. Finally, the crusher comes. It is a monstrous machine, a jaw of hydraulic steel. I am lifted, the entire shell of the truck, and placed into the maw. The pressure is immense, far greater than the hand that crushed me as a soda can. I am flattened into a pancake of metal, glass, and wire. I am loaded onto a train, a flatbed rolling through the Rust Belt. I am heading back to the shredder, but this time the mix is different. The auto shred is a chaotic mix of copper wires, steel bolts, and aluminum sheets. At the separation plant, I faced the heavy media tank. It is a bath of liquid with a specific density. The heavy metals, copper, zinc, lead, sink to the bottom. But I float. I am light. I skim the surface, separated once again from the base metals. I am clean. I am ready. And the market has changed again. The world is screaming for energy transmission. The grid needs to be rebuilt. They don't need cans today. They don't need cars. They need wire. The High Wire Act and the pulse of the nation. The furnace does not rest, and neither do I. To become what I must become next, I require a purity that rivals my original birth. The alloys of the automotive world, full of silicon and magnesium for hardness, are stripped away in a refining process that borders on torture. I must be purged. I am becoming EC grade, electrical conductor aluminum. I am cast into a continuous rod, a glowing snake of metal that is pulled and stretched until I am thin, flexible, and endlessly long. But I am not destined to be hidden inside a wall like my heavy, expensive cousin copper. Copper is the aristocrat of conductivity. I am the working-class hero. I am only 61% as conductive as copper, but I am 70% lighter. If the nation's power grid were made of copper, the towers would buckle under the weight, and the lines would snap under their own tension. It is my lightness that allows civilization to stretch across the vast American expanse. I am wound onto a massive wooden spool, miles of me, shining like silver hair. I am trucked to a remote staging ground in the Rocky Mountains. The air is thin here, just like when I was a B-29, but this time I am not flying on wings. I am the flight path. A helicopter descends, hovering over the transmission tower, a skeletal giant of steel standing 150 feet tall. A lineman, a daredevil in a Faraday suit, grabs me. I am unspooled and strung across the canyon. I am twisted around a core of steel, my old rival, now my silent partner, to form an ACSR cable, aluminum conductor, steel reinforced. The steel holds the weight. I carry the fire. Then the switch is thrown. You cannot understand the sensation of carrying 345,000 volts until you have done it. It is a vibration that goes down to the atomic nucleus. I am no longer just metal. I am a river of electrons. I hum, literally. That low-frequency buzz you hear when you stand under high-tension lines, that is me, vibrating at 60 cycles per second, the heartbeat of the North American grid. I hang there for 40 years. I see the world from a bird's eye view. I watch the seasons change from the white silence of winter blizzards to the shimmering heat of July. In the summer, the heat of the sun and the heat of the current flowing through me make me expand. I sag, dipping lower toward the tree line, heavy with the load of 1 million air conditioners in Phoenix or Denver.
The engineers watch me nervously, calculating the sag limits, but I hold on.
I am the lifeline. The energy flowing through my veins powers the hospital monitors in a neonatal unit, the stadium lights of a Friday night football game, and the chargers of the electric cars that my former automotive self was a part of. I am the invisible infrastructure of modern life. But nature is violent. I face aeolian vibration, the singing of the wind that whips me into a frenzy. I face ice storms that coat me in inches of heavy glaze, increasing my weight by 10 times. I groan under the strain. I watch neighboring lines snap, exploding in showers of blue-white sparks, but I hold. I am the aluminum that went to the moon. I do not break easily. Yet, technology evolves. The grid is becoming smart. The demand is shifting. After 4 decades of service, my surface is pitted by corona discharge and weathered by UV radiation. The utility company decides to upgrade. They need superconductors or composite cores. A crew arrives. I am de-energized. The hum stops. The silence is deafening. I am cut down, coiled up, and lowered to the muddy ground. I am old, gray, and tired. But I am not trash. The scrap value of high-purity electrical wire is enormous. I am sold to a specialized recycler. This time, I am not going to be a can or a car or a wire. I am going to become something that requires the ultimate combination of heat transfer and precision. I am going into the kitchen, but not as a pot. I am going to become the heart of the digital age's caffeine addiction. The 19-bar pressure and the rainbow shell. The high-voltage wire is chopped, melted, and purified once again. My electrical soul is traded for a thermal one. This time, I am not destined for strength or structural integrity. I am destined for beauty and speed. I am rolled out thinner than I have ever been in my existence. I am not a sheet. I am a film. I am microns thick, coated in vibrant jewel-toned lacquers, amethyst purple, ruby red, emerald green. I have become the coffee capsule. You might call me a pod. In the digital age where attention spans are short and patience is non-existent, I am the drug delivery system of choice. I am the heart of the modern caffeine addiction. My engineering is deceptive. I look like a simple, colorful thimble, but I am a high-tech pressure vessel, a miniaturized version of the B-29 bomber or the soda can I once was. The coffee grounds inside me are sealed in a nitrogen atmosphere, a trick learned from the widget days to prevent oxidation. I am hermetically sealed against time. The coffee inside me stays fresh for years, waiting for the moment of extraction. The machine you place me in is a marvel of violence. You drop me into the chamber and pull the lever. Snap! I am clamped in place. Then the water comes. It is superheated in an aluminum thermoblock, likely my cousin, and forced into me at 19 bars of pressure. Let's pause on that number, 19 bars. Your car tire is 2 bars. The soda can holds 6 bars. I am holding back nearly 275 psi of hot, angry water. The aluminum foil that covers my face, the burst membrane, is engineered to fail at the exact precise microsecond. When the pressure builds to the critical point, the foil ruptures against a waffle-patterned plate, creating a high-velocity emulsion of oil and water. This is the crema, the golden foam that tops your espresso. I am the definition of modern luxury, a single-use, precision-engineered aluminum artifact used for exactly 30 seconds of pleasure. But I am also controversial. For a while, I was the villain again. "Coffee pods are filling the landfills," the headline screamed. Because I am small and filled with wet coffee grounds, traditional recycling machines, the ones that launch cans into the air, couldn't process me. I was too heavy with grounds to float, too small to be caught. I fell through the grates.
So the industry had to invent a new loop. Nespresso and others built dedicated recycling streams. You put me in a special bag, I am shipped to a specialized facility where a shredder separates the coffee from the aluminum. The coffee grounds are turned into compost for vineyards in Napa Valley, and I am melted down again. My high-purity alloy from the electrical wire days is perfect for one specific high-value application. I am not going back to being a can. I am going to become the heart of the digital age's other addiction. I am going to become the unibody of a laptop. The digital sculptor and the cold touch of knowledge. The journey from the coffee pod to the computer is a journey from the ephemeral to the permanent. I am collected from the specialized recycling bins, stripped of the wet coffee grounds that once held the morning energy of a nation, and melted down once more. But this time, I am not rolled into a thin sheet or drawn into a wire. I am cast into a solid, heavy brick. I am becoming a slab. I am shipped to a facility that looks more like a laboratory than a factory, likely in Shenzhen or perhaps a specialized plant in Texas. I am about to undergo a process that revolutionized consumer electronics, the unibody construction.
Before this era, laptops were flimsy things, plastic shells screwed together, creaking and bending. But a company in Cupertino decided that the only way to achieve perfection was to carve the device out of a single solid block of aluminum. I enter the CNC, computer numerical control. This is not the brute force of the stamp or the heat of the furnace. This is sculpture. High-speed diamond-tipped drills and cutters descend upon me. They scream with a high-pitched whine, carving away 90% of my mass. I am not being added to, I am being subtracted from. They mill out the battery cavity, the keyboard tray, and the logic board mounts with micron-level precision. The aluminum shavings, called swarf, fly off in silver fountains, instantly collected to be melted down again. Waste is money lost. What remains is a skeleton of absolute rigidity. I am the chassis of a high-end laptop. I am sandblasted to a matte finish and then anodized, electrically treated to grow that sapphire-hard oxide layer I mentioned earlier, but this time dyed space gray or silver. Now, pause and look at your hands. If you are reading this on a MacBook or a modern iPad or even a high-end smartphone, you are touching me right now. Feel the coldness under your wrists? That is my thermal conductivity at work. The processor inside this machine is generating enough heat to boil water, but I am pulling that heat away, spreading it across my metallic skin to dissipate it into the air. I am the heat sink. I am the silent radiator that keeps the digital brain from melting. I am holding the internet. I am holding the photos of your children. I am holding the spreadsheet that defines your career. I have gone from holding beer to holding the sum of human knowledge. But this existence is fraught with a new kind of danger. As a can, I was easy to recycle. As a laptop, I am a nightmare. I am glued to a lithium-ion battery. I am screwed to a glass screen. I am soldered to gold and copper circuits. When this computer becomes obsolete in 5 years, I will become the most difficult challenge in the recycling world, e-waste. If you throw me in the trash, I become a toxic time bomb. The battery will eventually swell and catch fire. The plastic will rot. But I, the aluminum shell, will sit there, an intricate, useless sculpture buried in the dark. However, if you take me to an Apple store or a certified e-waste recycler, I meet a new kind of predator. I meet Daisy or Dave, disassembly robots designed specifically to rip me apart. They freeze the battery to neutralize the glue, pop the screws, and separate the precious aluminum from the toxic components. It is a violent surgery, but it liberates me. I am thrown back into the melt. And now we approach the end. I have been everything. I have been the wrapper of a sandwich, the wing of a bomber, the wire of the grid, and the shell of a computer. I am tired. The laws of thermodynamics say that entropy always increases. Every time I am melted, a tiny fraction of me is lost to oxidation, to the dross, to the slag. I am slowly fading. But there is one final form I must take, a form that returns me to the silence where I began. The silver dust and the return to the sky. After my life as a laptop, holding your secrets and your work, I am sent to the shredder one last time. But this time, I am not melted into a bar. I am destined for a transformation so radical it borders on magic. I am going to become dust. I am sent to an atomization plant. Here, molten aluminum is blasted with high-pressure gas, exploding the liquid stream into microscopic droplets. I cool instantly into a fine silvery powder. I am no longer a solid structure. I am billions of tiny particles, soft as flour, yet potentially terrifying. You see, my entire life, from the can to the car to the computer, has been a battle against oxidation. I fought to keep oxygen out. But now, as a powder, I have a new purpose. I am hungry for oxygen. And when aluminum powder meets oxygen in the right conditions, it doesn't just rust, it detonates. I am mixed with ammonium perchlorate and a binder to create a rubbery gray substance. I am being packed into a massive steel casing in the desert of Utah. I am no longer a consumer product. I am solid rocket fuel. I am destined for the SLS, the Space Launch System, the rocket that will return Americans to the moon and eventually take them to Mars. I am packed into the twin boosters that flank the massive orange core stage. I am the brute force. The liquid engines are complex and elegant, but I am the raw power that breaks the chains of gravity. The countdown begins. 10, 9, 8. I sit on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral at Captain Carter. I remember the bauxite mine in the tropics. I remember the cold beer in a hand on a Friday night. I remember the hum of the electrical grid.
I do not survive this. This is not recycling. This is sacrifice. In a fraction of a second, I am consumed. I burn at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I am the blinding white fire that lifts 2, 6, or 10 million pounds of metal and human hope off the ground. The vibration is so intense it registers as a seismic event. I am the roar that shakes the chest of every spectator for miles. As I burn, I bond violently with oxygen. I transform from aluminum metal, Al, into aluminum oxide, Al2O3, a white, solid smoke. Look at the trail of a rocket launching. That massive pillar of white smoke, that is me. That is the ghost of the aluminum can. I have become a cloud. I rise through the troposphere, the stratosphere, and into the mesosphere. I push the ship into the black, giving it the final shove it needs to reach orbit. My job is done. The empty casings fall back to the ocean to be recovered, but I, the matter itself, am now a trail of white dust floating in the upper atmosphere. Epilogue: the sunset and the eternal loop. I drift in the high currents of the atmosphere, 50 miles above the surface of the Earth. I am microscopic crystals of sapphire, for that is what aluminum oxide is, catching the light of the sun. When you look up at a particularly beautiful sunset and you see that deep scattering of purple and red light, you might be looking at me. I reflect the sun. I scatter the light. Eventually, gravity will win. It always does. Slowly, over months or years, I will drift down. I will fall as a microscopic dust, landing perhaps on a leaf in the Amazon, or in the snow of the Himalayas, or in the ocean.
If I land in the soil, I will become part of the clay again. I will mix with the earth, waiting. Maybe in 1,000,000 years, another species will dig me up, or maybe the roots of a tree will absorb me. But my brothers and sisters are still down there with you. The can you tossed in the bin yesterday is already melting. The F-150 is driving down the highway. The Voyager probe is crossing the space between stars. We are the aluminum. We are the stardust that learned to fly, to hold your drink, to carry your voice, and to burn for your dreams. We never truly die. We just change shape. So, the next time you hear that sharp psh crack of a cold drink opening, pause for a second. Look at the silver rim. Respect the metal. It has come a long way to be with you, and it has a long way left to go.